Hello. This video is intended to be a practical explainer on how you use the toilet when you're traveling in a foreign country. Because it's quite distressing when you realize you need to go, but you don't know how to use the infrastructure. This video will cover that. There's two main things we need to discuss in this video: bidets and toilets. I will assume that you basically know what a toilet is for, so I'm going to discuss bidets first, because even though they're very common in parts of the world, they're very uncommon in other parts of the world, and there will be some people who have never heard of or used a bidet before in their life. A bidet is a device that shoots out a stream of water. The idea here is that after you use the toilet, you're going to use that stream of water from the bidet to clean yourself with, and then you use the toilet paper just to dry off with. So again, the water does all the cleaning, and the toilet paper is just for drying off with. Now, the rule of thumb when you're traveling is if there is a bidet, you're going to use the bidet. The reason why is that in some countries, the piping is not designed to be able to handle toilet paper being flushed down the toilet. Likewise, the toilet paper they give you is often not strong enough to stand up to wiping. So if you avoid using the bidet, you can get yourself into trouble in two completely separate ways. First of all, by trying to wipe with toilet paper that shreds in your hand, and second of all, by clogging the toilet with toilet paper. So again, the rule is if there is a bidet, you use the bidet. Now, if you've never used a bidet in your life, don't even worry about this. Bidets are awesome. Once you get used to using one, you'll never want to go back to using just toilet paper. You feel so much cleaner. If you're an owner of lady bits, the proper way to use a bidet is to spray from the front toward the back for both of your orifices. This is to prevent cross-contamination between your orifices, which might lead to a urinary tract infection. If you're an owner of gentleman bits, then your urethra is less vulnerable to this sort of thing, so you can spray from either the front or the back, whichever is most comfortable for you. Now, whenever there's a bidet, one thing you should do is look around for a small garbage can sitting next to the toilet. If there is one, that's your clue that you're in a place where the pipes are not designed to be able to tolerate toilet paper being flushed down the toilet, which means that after you use the bidet, all of the toilet paper that you use to dry yourself with should be disposed of in that garbage can, not in the toilet. Let's now talk about some of the styles of bidet that you might see. This is my personal favorite. It looks like the sprayer on a garden hose, and the water comes out at a fairly high pressure, so you can just point it at whatever orifice you just used and blast away until you're pretty sure everything is sparkling clean. There are also wand-style bidets, which work in a very similar way, except that they have a longer head, which makes it easier to aim the water at exactly the spot you need it to go. My next favorite bidet looks like a separate toilet bowl, except that water sprays up from the bottom of it. The idea here is that you deposit your wastes in the toilet, and then you hop sideways onto the bidet, and then you sit with your orifice over top of that spray of water until everything is nice and clean. Now, those of you with lady bits may be thinking, wait, what if I drip on my hop sideways onto the bidet? Nobody wants that. Well, here's a trick you can use. Put two fingers on the dry outer parts of your lady bits and then pull upwards to give things a bit of a flick. Do that a few times, and that should flick off any stray droplets. And then you can make your hop sideways onto the bidet with confidence. The next bidet we'll discuss shoots water out of a tap at the back. Sometimes it's built right into the toilet itself. Now, I don't like this style of bidet as well as some because even though a lot of water comes out of the tap, it doesn't come out at a very high pressure sometimes, and that means you might need to sit there a while before everything dissolves away. Also, if you're an owner of lady bits and you want to get the water aimed at them, you basically have to flip around and sit on the bidet backwards, and if you're tall, your knees run into the wall. So it's not ideal, but you can make it work. The most low-tech bidet that we'll discuss is a cup and a source of water like a tap. How you use this depends on whether you're using a squat toilet or a sit toilet. If you're using a sit toilet, then what you'll do is you'll cup your hand, and then you'll pour water and use your hand to funnel the water towards your body. If you do this right, your hand does not touch your body. For lady bits, this technique works great. For bowel movements, it works less great. I'll talk more about that in a moment. When you're using a cup bidet with a squat toilet, however, you need a different technique. The reason why is that if you're squatting, the angles don't work, especially if you've got your clothing around your knees. So what you do instead is that you fill up the cup with a small amount of water and then you throw it at your orifice. Do this as many times as you need to get everything clean. Now for lady bits, again, this technique works great. Your aim may not be wonderful at first, but you can get everything rinsed off just fine. It also works pretty well for bowel movements. Of course, that means you're probably now thinking, what do you mean, pretty well? What if it's not good enough? What if I've only got a cup bidet and no toilet paper, and I'm throwing water at my bumhole, but it's not getting clean enough? What do I do? You're not going to like this. So before I tell you what you need to do, let me first say that handheld portable bidets are a thing that exists that you can buy. So if what I'm about to describe sounds like something you don't ever want to face, you never have to. You just have to come prepared by bringing a handheld portable bidet with you. Okay? Okay. So let's get back to the nitty-gritty of what you do when you've only got a cup bidet and you're throwing water at your bumhole, but you can't get it clean enough. What do? You get a finger involved. Yes, this is exactly as bad as it sounds. Fortunately, there is a technique that is going to help prevent too much material from sticking to your finger. What you do is you pour lots of water past your bum hole while very quickly and lightly rubbing it with the finger. If your touch is quick and light and there's lots of water going by, then that should prevent too much material from sticking to the finger. Instead, it should mostly rinse off. Obviously, when you're done, you should rinse that finger with water until it looks visibly clean, and then avoid touching anything with that hand until you've had a chance to wash with soap and water. So, I'll bet you want to hear a little more about those handheld portable bidets now, right? So, as I said, you can buy these commercially, either online or in some stores, but you can also make your own. What you need is a bottle that you can squeeze in order to force lots of water out at once, and that has a small opening so that the water comes out at a high velocity. Sport drink bottles can work, so can condiment bottles, and so can lotion bottles. In fact, the one I've shown here, which shoots water sideways, is one of your best choices, because you can aim the water upward too, which makes it easier to use as a bidet. Whatever bottle you end up using, make sure that you test it before you leave for your trip, because sometimes they don't work as well as you thought they would have, and you don't want to be stuck using the finger if you don't have to. So now we're done talking about bidets and we'll discuss toilets. There's two main types of toilets in the world: squat toilets and sit toilets. On a sit toilet, you sit on the seat and release your wastes into the bowl, which usually contains water, although composting toilets do not. With a squat toilet, you squat and release your wastes into the bowl, which usually does not contain water at first. Now, there is one known issue with sit toilets, and that is that it's harder to have a bowel movement on a sit toilet. Things just don't move as easily. So, if you're used to using squat toilets, you may find that you have a little bit of trouble pooing when you're using a sit toilet. If that's the case, here's what you can do. First of all, please don't squat on a sit toilet because the seat's not strong enough to take that and you might break the seat. Instead, remain seated, lean back a little bit, and pull your knees up to your chest. It doesn't make bowel movements as easy as when you're squatting, but it does make them a lot easier than when you're sitting. So now let's talk about how you use a sit toilet in different places around the world. Because although how you use the toilet itself is basically the same from place to place, how you clean up afterwards is not. So even if you've used a sit toilet all your life, you may still need to learn some new skills about how to use them before you go traveling. So I'll start with the toilets that I'm most familiar with, which are the ones used in Canada and the United States. The toilets are flushed using a lever on the tank, and normally there will never be a bidet. Bidets are simply very rare in Canada and the United States. That means that after you use the toilet, you will clean yourself with toilet paper only, and then you should throw all of that toilet paper into the toilet. None of it should go in the garbage can. The pipes in Canada and the United States are large enough to accept moderate amounts of toilet paper, so all of your soiled toilet paper should go into the toilet and be flushed away with the rest of your wastes. If you put any of it in the garbage can, the locals will be quite disgusted by that. It's just not done. And speaking of disgusting, if you're from a country where bidets are common, then the fact that Canada and the United States don't have them probably seems pretty disgusting to you. So if you don't think that you're going to feel clean using only toilet paper, then you know what you can do. Come prepared with a portable bidet. One thing I'll point out, however, is that because bidets are so rare in Canada and the United States, if your handheld bidet makes noises and other people hear them, they'll assume that it's your body making those noises and they might become alarmed about your health. So if you're using your portable bidet in a public restroom, try to be a little bit quiet with it, just because the locals won't understand what they're hearing. The toilets in Europe tend to be very similar to the ones in Canada and the United States, except that they're usually flushed via a button. In fact, it's usually two buttons: a small button for small flushes and a big button for big flushes. Bidets are a lot more common in Europe, but in some places they're optional because the pipes are large enough for toilet paper to be flushed down them. But that's not true everywhere in Europe, so be on the lookout for that small garbage can that tells you that you should not be flushing toilet paper down the toilet in this location. The toilets used in South and Central America, as well as many parts of the Middle East, usually have a bidet and always have that small garbage can because the pipes are definitely not large enough to tolerate toilet paper being flushed down them. There is one thing you need to be aware of, however. Even though you'll always find a bidet in a private home or in a hotel room, when you go to a public washroom, such as at a shopping mall or an airport, there will not be a bidet, but you still can't flush toilet paper down the toilet. So what do you do in these situations? Well, you take your soiled toilet paper, you wrap it up in another piece of toilet paper to make a little package, and then that gets thrown into the garbage. Now, if you're thinking to yourself, well, doesn't this smell up the bathroom? No, it doesn't. I've been in lots of public bathrooms in South America and they don't smell, so the system does work. But what about for bowel movements, you might ask? Doesn't that smell things up? Well, for bowel movements, you can use a slightly different technique. You can use a small amount of toilet paper just for your first wipe and throw that in the toilet, but then all the rest of the toilet paper you use would be bundled up like before and thrown in the garbage can. And that strikes a nice balance between not putting too much stinky stuff in the garbage can, but also not putting too much toilet paper down the toilet. And if this all sounds like something you just don't want to have to deal with, you know what to do. Come prepared with a portable handheld bidet. So now let's talk about squat toilets. Squat toilets come in a variety of different types, from modern porcelain ones that you can flush, to porcelain ones that you flush by pouring a bucket of water down them, to a hole in the ground that generally doesn't need to be flushed. Now, if you've been using sit toilets your whole life, then the thought of using a squat toilet may be a little intimidating to you. So let me give you a little pep talk about using squat toilets. Squat toilets are great for two main reasons. The first is that you don't have to touch them. Doesn't matter how nasty that squat toilet is, the only thing getting close to it is the soles of your shoes. The second reason is that squatting is arguably a more natural position for you to have a bowel movement in. Lots of mammals squat when they poo, and arguably humans should also. The reason why is that there's a muscle that lassos your lower intestine. When you sit, that muscle loosens up part of the way. When you squat, it loosens up all the way. So when you squat, your bowel movements tend to slip out faster, more completely, and more cleanly than when you're sitting. So squat toilets do have their benefits. So now let's teach you the correct way to squat. First of all, until you get good at it, I recommend that if you have the option, you strip from the waist down. This is just so that you don't have to worry about articles of clothing flopping somewhere that they should not go. Next, stand with your feet about shoulder width apart and squat down. Keep your feet completely flat. Resist any urge to rise up on your toes. You want your feet flat. Get your bum as low as you can. The backs of your thighs should be resting right on the back of your calves. You may not feel particularly comfortable in this position, but you should feel very stable. If your knees are not good or your balance is not, then you may need to compromise the hygienic nature of using a squat toilet and put your hands down for balance. I've heard that in some parts of Asia they have a bar on the wall that you can dangle off of, which is a fantastic idea. Unfortunately, I've never seen one in the wild, so you should not expect it. If you're not used to using a squat toilet, then it's a good idea to do a bit of training before you leave on your trip. Just practice and make sure that you can hold this position for about 5 minutes. After you're done using the squat toilet, clean yourself using toilet paper or a bidet, and then flush the toilet using whatever mechanism is provided. And by the way, if you are having a bowel movement in a squat toilet, it helps to splash a bit of water on the porcelain first before you start. That helps all the material slide down the hole better later when you do flush it. The last type of squat toilet we'll talk about is a bush toilet. In other words, when there is no toilet and you're just doing your business behind a convenient piece of landscape. To use a bush toilet, adopt the same squatting position you use for any squat toilet. However, if you're not using a shovel to dig a hole for your wastes, then you should pay a little bit of attention to the shape of the ground underneath your feet. Ideally, you want the ground to have a bit of a slope and for your toes to be pointed uphill. You also want there to be a bit of a dip in the ground between your feet that is going to tend to funnel liquids away from you. If you're an owner of lady bits, feel free to use that flicking trick to get rid of stray droplets. And then comes the question of how to clean up afterwards, because it's not environmentally friendly for you to leave bits of soiled toilet paper flapping around the landscape. If you use toilet paper in the bush, you should pack it out with you. Of course, that's kind of disgusting, so you probably know what I'm going to suggest next. Consider coming prepared with a handheld portable bidet. If you use a bidet, then any toilet paper you use will just be damp, not soiled, which makes it much less disgusting for you to carry around later. Alternately, you can also just commit to air drying and then you don't need toilet paper at all, which is very practical and convenient when you're out in the bush. That concludes this video on how to go to the bathroom when you're traveling. Hopefully you've learned enough to approach any bathroom infrastructure with confidence. Happy travels and happy tinkles!